Myth and Legend in Early Greek Art. Myth and Legend in Early Greek Art by Carl Sheffold. Dedicated in grateful esteem to Robert Boehringer. Introduction. I wish to proclaim the victor in the Pathian race of the bronze shield bearers. Telesecrates, to cry out with the deep girdled graces at his triumph. Happy man, and the glory of Cyrene, the horse driver. Once the flowing-haired son of Leto snatched Cyrene away from the wind-echoed vales of Pelion, took the huntress maiden in a golden chariot, and established her as a queen in a fruitful land, to dwell in plenty at the foundation of a third continent. Pindar, Pith 9, 1-7. Introduction. The Greeks possessed an immense wealth of legend. The tales were told differently from place to place, changing from generation to generation as they were passed, in ever-varying form from mouth to mouth. Every noble family traced its descent back to the world of legend in the heroic past. Any man who performed a glorious deed would be compared with some legendary hero. Every new occurrence was measured besides myth. In a way, the wars of Hellas and Asia were traced back to the Trojan War. The victors in the games would be compared with Heracles and other heroes. Alexander the Great revered Achilles as his ideal. The legends, however, were no Bible. They were not holy scripture of which every word had been set down and fixed for all time. At each telling, the narration of the tales differed, giving ever-varying versions in both poetry and art. In giving new forms to the heroic images of the Greeks gained a deeper and purer understanding of themselves. Each interpretation of a legend contained, at the same time, an interpretation of its own time. At an early stage, Heracles was admired simply as a mighty conquering of difficulties. A sophisticated civilization made him a lover of music, and later still, his destiny was seen as tragic. Finally, he becomes a symbol of redemption, since after all his labors, he is at length admitted into Olympus. Nowadays, when we think of the past, we think of historical events and personages. The people of antiquity have no interest in the fortuitous historical events, but endeavored to grasp that which was truly significant. Where they think of history, they thought of legend. Heroes of ancient time were generally imagined as better and stronger than modern men. In fact, of the greatness of the past, the immediately foregoing period, together with the history of contemporary times, appeared of small significance. Not until classical times did a feeling for history awaken. We shall be able to see this sense of history foreshadowed at an early stage in the reshaping of legend, although actually written history is found only after the period 500 BC. Of the wealth of legend which existed among the people since prehistoric times, only a portion found new form in the historical period of the first millennium. And of the epics, tragedies, paintings, and sculptures embodying the new form, again, only a portion have survived. However, we are fortunate in possessing lists of the contents of certain lost works as well as fragments of others, and also a rich tradition of paintings and sculpture. Many features of legend have survived only in vase paintings and reliefs. An example of this is the magnificent representation of the fall of Troy on the relief decorated amphora from Mykonos. Nowhere else are the wooden horse and the sufferings of the Trojans depicted in such detail and with such dramatic immediacy. The illustrations of this book are filled with peculiar motifs, whose specialized and subtle language we shall only gradually learn to understand. They should not be given a mere cursory glance, but should be examined as works of art capable of giving ever increasing pleasure the more closely familiar we become with them. Greek art is never simple illustration. It always has something to say in an individual and peculiar way. Hellenic legend lives and changes constantly in art no less than in poetry. During the Middle Ages, the situation was quite different because there existed a holy scripture which had to be illustrated. The Greeks had no sacred book, restricting the scope of their art. The free expression of constant new religious experiences was part of the basic content of Greek art. Anyone wishing to become familiar with the legends will, first of all, read Homer, Hesiod, and the tragedians, but visual art is no less important guide. The enchantment of legend rests in the artistic expression given to it. In many cases, where the written versions of myths have been lost, artistic representation helped to bring their content before us. In poems and pictures, we can grasp the living legend. Prosaic accounts of the legends, such as we find in handbooks of mythology, are necessary too, in that they help us find our bearings in the world of legend. Yet, whereas the poems describing the anger of Achilles and the homecoming of Odysseus are quite unforgettable, and the representations of the deeds of Heracles on the temple of Zeus in Olympus are profoundly impressive, the tales as they are retold in the handbooks slip from the memory. It is strange, moreover, how seldom these handbooks drawn on the visual arts as a source material, for they are inestimable source of living legend. They could become as much a part of our most intimate artistic heritage as are the biblical illustrations familiar to us from childhood. The visual arts are an invaluable guide for yet another reason since, from the immeasurable wealth of tradition, they select those aspects which were important to the people of a particular period. Art teaches us to see the legends with the eye of the Greeks. The various times are characterized by the themes chosen and the artistic form given to them. The illustrated legends bear witness to themselves to the period in which they were created. Art teaches us to see the legends with the eyes of the Greeks. The illustrated legends bear witness in themselves to the period in which they were created. We must therefore repeatedly ask both what is represented in each period and how it is represented. It is not restricting ourselves to a single legend. We give ourselves the opportunity to make constant comparisons and to ask why one legend should have been chosen in one particular period and at a different one in another, as well as why they were conceived in precisely the way they were. In the early period, for example, there was a greater interest in the conflict among the gods, whilst interest during the classical phase centered on the birth and their amatory activities, since the people of the time sought connections and discovered that all things in life are organically and functionally linked. Everything new was linked to mythical archetypes. For every new philosophy of life, artists sought new ways of illustrating the legends. The Greeks' relationship to legend originates in the same spirit of understanding, order, and clarity as found in their philosophy. At the same time, however, new concepts are never compressed within old images, schemes, and dogmas. The image of tradition is constantly changed. The two basic forces in Greek history, tireless progress and a faithful retention of great tradition come to compromise in the illustration of myth.